Joseph clarifies and demystifies, answering pertinent questions regarding the Fall's 4th chapter.
Hello and welcome back to the Sanctuary of Healing, the home of the Joseph Communications. I'm Tony Clarkson. I'm here with my good friend and colleague Michael G. Reccia, and today we're going to go through the questions and answers from chapter 4 of the Fall. So without further ado, I think we'll get straight into that. Is that okay, Michael?
Yes, that's great, Tony.
Okay.
Yeah. Because Joseph was talking about last time the nature and influence of colour, and having come to the end of his initial address, he invited questions, and you were the first one to ask one.
I was the first one to ask the question. So this one is from me, and my question is, I would like to ask a question, and I think I am trying to clear my own thoughts on the huge amount of information you have just given us. Rays of colour are a part of how creation happens, and the energy from colour is a tool that angelic beings can use to create. We as humans are stuck and surrounded by dense matter that limit our ability to use those rays of colour. Are there spiritual exercises we can do to make us more flexible, to be able to see, use and manipulate that colour in a way that we don't at present?
And Joseph replies, to use an analogy, it is like having a stain in front of you that needs to be removed. Imagine that you are looking through a reflective pane of glass that has become badly scored and stained and prevents you from seeing the beauty outside of yourself and that beauty reflected back into yourself. What we want you to do, and are giving you the tools to do, is to remove that stain. And you remove that stain not by adding to the stain. At the moment you add to the stain. You seek to remove violence with violence. You seek to remove power struggles with other power struggles. You have to remove the stain by infusing it with light. You remove the stain by washing it away, by infusing it with the light that I have taught you, hopefully, how to use in the meditations in the other books. And then you see through the pane of glass where the stain was to the reality that once was. The use of colour is a natural tendency of the angelic form. The colour itself is an expression of the intentions or wishes of the angelic form. It is the movement of intent from an individual given form. You recognise each other at present by the coalescing of heavy matter into a form that is constant. That is how you recognise each other. You are looking at the surface, but beneath the surface there is the angelic form. And the angelic form is no form at all. But the intent from the angelic form has a characteristic that can be recognized by other angelic forms. And that characteristic is the expression of color. So the expression of color is a natural result of a process within the angelic form, which is the contemplation of and examination of potential. And that potential is creation. The angelic form contemplates. The angelic form asks, what if? And that what if is then given a form outside and around the angelic being. If that form is considered worthy of contemplation by the whole and a worthy addition to the whole, then it is solidified somewhat and is brought into being. And it is brought into being by the interplay of coloured rays, expressed from a number of angelic forms who have contemplated certain potential realities and who then bring those into actual reality in order to experience within them and bring to the Godhead the consequences of living within that reality for a time in order to enhance the Godhead. Certain realities are brought through, examined, and found not to be worthy or of little potential interest, and they are then dissolved again through the use of colour. They are eradicated and wiped out, as that stain will be wiped out by the projection of light. Other realities are found worthy, of interest, and good for both the evolution of the individual and of the whole, and therefore their matrices become part of the knowledge of how to bring through reality that is applied on many different levels. It is a trial and error situation, but in the case of the earth, it was a trial that became a huge error. And we will examine how that error occurred. Does that make things any simpler, or are they then more complicated?
Thank you. I understood part of what you said, and there are parts where I'll have to listen again to what you said from the recording. But yes, I do basically understand.
It is because of the personal stain. That is a terrible way to describe your recognition point, as a personal stain. And I mean no offense by that. And it applies equally to every human being on earth. And because of the filtering effects of the heavy matter that your soul is surrounded by, that there is such a struggle to understand what I am trying to put across. That filter that you are used to seeing through makes what is beyond, behind, and at the core of that filter difficult to understand. Do you see that?
I do.
It is that which prevents what I am saying from seeming simple. And it is as though I am explaining a complexity, when in effect I am just helping you to remember the natural order of things. But you can only remember the natural order of things according to your ability to see through the illusion that has encapsulated you. Is there another question, please?
So this is a question from Jane. Could I ask a question about form? Because it sounds as if the angelic beings are in this sort of nebulous coloured gas, just examining potentials. Do they put those potentials into some kind of more solid form so they can experience them?
That is an excellent question, and it is a point that I should have touched upon. And the point is this. Originally, when certain potentials were considered worthy of further examination within the confines of the planetary sphere, they were then brought forward. It is as though you are selecting a film from all the films in front of you, and you take out a particular title and decide to play it to see whether that film is something that you wish to see through to the end. So at certain times, by consensus of all the individuals involved in creation within this sphere, certain potentials from those limitless possibilities will have been put forward as worthy of investigation as a structure rather than a projection. Everything is a projection, but in this case, we are talking about giving, as you have said, solidification of matter for a time to examine whether a potential is worthy of incorporating into the manual of creation. Gaseous is only an analogy. At its purest, it is in an abstract state from which potentials are examined, and by consensus of the majority, not in any political way, but in a spiritual way, in that the majority of minds are sufficiently interested to investigate a certain potential, that potential is brought forth, but within the confines of the sphere of potentiality that we call the earth. At its beginnings, the earth had many forms, and many forms were investigated. There is neither the energy nor the resources to examine those within this chapter today, but yes, many forms were brought forth. I do not want to preempt myself by going into the reason why this form is the stuck slide, but we are working towards that in a logical sequence to explain what once was and then what happened, and what is, and how we can get back to where we should be. Do you understand?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
One final question.
And this is David. Joseph, in the past, we have talked about the lower astral, the earth plane and spheres above that. Are all those actually contained within this original earth? And when you talk about finally escaping, what we are doing is getting back to the state where the earth is as it was, so then we can shut it down and go off and do something else.
The intention is to bring each soul back to its original template. And the spiritual spheres are a gradual cleansing and restoring to that state. Originally, as the spiritual beings that you really are, there was no need for that filtration process in order to get you back to your start point. Originally, you would examine potential, but also move in and out of that potential as the observer and creator of that potential to examine its merits or otherwise, but always aware at that point that you were an angelic being, that you were part of God, and at any time could move your volition back into the whole to enjoy that viewpoint, or back into individuality to enjoy that viewpoint. Our purpose is to free souls from a particular matrix that has become stuck and is running out of energy. Yes, there is the need to move on, but that need to move on is a personal consideration for each soul once it has been restored to its angelic consciousness. In other words, certain souls will choose to move on, and certain souls will, we hope, look at the earth and say, well, we are back to the beginning. We can now have a look at potential within this sphere safely, having learned from the experiment that went wrong. We will not repeat that, but we will use this area of potential again and honour the sphere that we have created and give it joy once again by allowing it to fulfil its role as a sentient being. So the answer is yes, souls will come away from the earth, but souls will also be able to revisit the earth in its purest form. Not to become locked in, and not even to view the earth as it is at this point, but to view the earth as it is at its core, as a sphere of potential. Because ultimately, the whole of this physical universe is a series of nested spheres of potential. Your accessing and creation of potential as angelic beings is absolutely limitless, but you have limited yourselves to one area or bubble. But within that bubble, you can create all things, and outside of that bubble, you can also experience and create all things. It is bringing the bubble back in line with the rest of creation that is the task, and also, of course, freeing those souls and the planet from the stuck slide that is causing, I don't want to say anti-potential, although that is a term that seems fitting, is causing a loop of disintegration and reintegration around the same process loop, and is causing the same scenario to be played over and over and over and over again. Do you see that?
Yes.
When you began this journey, and when I began this journey, you could little have understood the magnitude of the information that we seek to bring through. And the book that we as the soul group are dictating at the moment, as I think you can see, will be the one that will be available to all, but will only be understood by perhaps a few. It is hoped that the other books in the series have enough instruction in them to liberate souls, but only for those that are ready will the book that we are currently dictating make sense and resonate. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
This is why there is an order to the sequence of the books. This is why you have the very great potential to interest people with the current book, and Joseph here is making a reference to the then current book, Your Life After Death. And I wish you to know that we are working, sitting, projecting, seeing that book, delivering that message to everyone. Part of what we are doing in dictating this book, and the large part of what we are doing, is infiltrating the field and, on beams of light, delivering the need for that book into people's minds. Not to interfere with their free will, but almost like an advertisement to say, here is the book. Here is something that is of great value to you. Do you desire it? And to put that thought into the minds of so many people. I must vacate the premises now, or there will be very little left to work with.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Tony.
Here endeth another chapter.
Endeth the question and answers from chapter 4.
It is. And so I'd like to thank you all again for listening and for watching. And I hope it was as meaningful for you as it has been for me, even though I've read the book several times and was there when it came through. I'd like to thank you all, and if you've enjoyed what you've heard and seen, I invite you to press the subscribe button, which helps us. And we look forward to seeing you in the next chapter, which will be chapter 5, very soon. Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless and take care.